So what you up to?
Well, our first 3 tests on the water keg came back positive for coliform bacteria. So, which they're the first prototypes that we made, and so I guess we weren't expecting all negative results, but it is kind of disheartening.
So you guys had a couple of ideas. You've had a few ups and downs with your project so far, but you guys went into Ginger today to do something. Tell us about what you were doing and why you went there.
All right. We went in because we, 2 of us, thought of an altered design for the filter that we're trying to create. And we would need a smaller bin, well, bigger than that, but we were looking for a different size container. And half of the problem with our current design is cost. So we're trying to find a large container for the original design that would be smaller in cost. All right, so we start off with the filtration keg or filtration pot, and we just double it up. We glue one on top of the other using a polyurethane sealant. And then we run a PVC pipe all the way through so that this, at the end, it's got just an end cap on there, resting on the bottom so that it's not going to break at any vibration. And then it runs all the way through. And inside we have just plastic tubing with a check valve inside that is just a one-way check valve, so that you just have to give it a bit of a tug and you'll have a clean flow of water coming through. When you're done, you lift it up and theoretically no dirty water will go back in. The pots are made with sawdust and
corn husk sometimes, and sometimes it should be made with colloidal silver.
Essentially, when they fire it, that stuff disintegrates, and you're left with a much more porous pot. So that when this portion is submerged in water in this larger keg, it's going to flow in with the pressure from this keg. It's being pushed through, and the inside water is not able to be contaminated once it's through, unlike this where things can still fall into it or still fall into an open container. It stays cooler than with an open container, and it's also effective because it tastes the same as water. It doesn't taste like chlorine, so people are more receptive to this. So this is just placed inside a larger container of water. We also are going to seal the top and the bottom wherever PVC is entering by drilling holes in the bottom and top or bottoms of the kegs. And then it's sealed using a wooden block and more PVC. And then we'll just tie it using any kind of rope so that the buoyant keg inside isn't floating around. And yeah, they can just.
All right, so this seems like the perfect design. Looks like you guys are home free. Why aren't you jumping around and rejoicing in the streets?
It's rather expensive.
Very.
Which is why right now.
Well, why is it expensive?
We have to pay transport costs. We had to pay transport costs for these to come in from Kenya, but we've just recently learned that there's a factory that probably could produce them closer to Lingira. But it's also a lot of parts, and even just assembly, you have to be very knowledgeable in assembly to do it right.
And this piece is quite expensive, and you'll also have to transport it on the boat from Jinja, which is about a 2-hour boat ride. And they're pretty bulky, and so if you wanted to manufacture many of them, you'd have to make more trips than if you just had something smaller like this or something that was already on the island.
The polyurethane sealant isn't local, which is unsustainable in itself. we can't find a replacement for that so far.
Tubing is sometimes an issue because some of the tubing here is not as durable and will break down after a while.
As you just saw when we tried, a huge part of it is you just have to clean it once a month, which is simple, but lifting it out, we just lifted it out, and the epoxy glue that's holding the PVC glue that's holding these together broke off. So it's little things like that that we have to make sure that the design is solid enough that it's practical, that they can lift it up and clean it.
So the other option would be to take a smaller container, take only one filter element, and set it in like this. Ideally it would fit up to the rim, and then you would seal that with hopefully a polyurethane sealant or any sealant you can find, as long as it's durable and it'll make a good seal. And then you can put a spigot in on the side of this, or you could also put it on the bottom if it was rested on blocks or anything. And you put a spigot in here, and then you put water in the top here, just
PVC
like,
elbow too.
yeah, you put water in the top here, just like you would with the earlier design, which is just using this and a bucket of water, except you're also sealing it so that the water can't get recontaminated down here. And you would also need a PVC elbow or a hole drilled in here so that it would let air in so that the spigot could run well. And then you could cover the top with any kind of fine cloth so that large debris is filtered out as the water's poured in. So that's our other idea.
Maybe mesh on the PVC elbow so that nothing's going in.
Yeah. And so the goal today was to go into Jinja and buy everything locally, and we left with a sealant, this container, and a spigot, and we're going to try and make one
And
with
mesh.
and mesh to put on the elbow so that nothing can get in. And so the goal is to make one with things we bought just 2 hours away, which is not that close, but as close as we can get, and see how it goes.
So how are you guys feeling about the project so far?
I think
There've
up
been
and
some
down is
setbacks, but we've only been here a week, so hopefully. And the other thing is that the most important part, the filter element, can be custom ordered at any size. And so now that we've been here and can find like containers, cheap containers locally, we could, even though this whole batch might be a wash, we could still set it up where it would fit well and be a lot cheaper and easier to transport from Jinja to the island. So
I think we're learning a lot as we're going along, and part of the process of this, we couldn't have done it in a different order, but ideally we would have been able to first come here and find the size of the containers that we have available, and then order the filters. But it's a long process, so we're doing the preliminaries so that it can happen maybe realistically in the next year or two.
And part of our limitation is that we were sort of grandfathered into this project, and that's a very lucky thing for us to have the technology, but at the same time that means that the design that we were given is the design that we need to be using in order to do that justice. And we have to do the original engineer justice. This is her work.
I feel pretty thankful for the amount of funding we've had too. That's a huge up, that we can go to Jinja and buy some different size tubs and not have to worry about every cent we're spending. But it's frustrating.
But at the same time, that's also almost a bad thing, because if we were someone who's living here, we would have to worry about every cent we were spending.
So that's what we're using our resources to do, so that they won't have to. But we've had our definite frustrations with it. Being on the ground and doing it is a lot different than being in a classroom at university. Thinking about the concept, it's different to have a filter. It's good. It's a relief, but it's also revealing. And to see the need, I think, is different. To really visibly understand the need for clean water makes our role seem a little bit more imperative, or a little more. I want to be able to find some kind of solution if we're here.
It'll be a lot of work, and it'll require everyone's input and everyone's insights. So, but it is yes and no. It's like what I thought.